Hello, hello, hello. How are you guys doing today? Okay, so September is recovery month, and since I am a recovering alcoholic and addict, I wanted to do a dedicated video over here during recovery month to celebrate recovery, to let people out there know we do recover, we do have amazing lives, we are not a glum lot, and to answer some questions that you guys have about recovery. I talk about being in recovery, being sober, in almost all of my videos on all of my channels. It is a priority. It is the priority in my life. And so I've talked about it so much that I don't really know what people want to know anymore. And so I put a Q&A up on Instagram and I said, ask me what questions you guys want to know. I'm going to do a video for Recovery Month. Ask me what questions you want to know about my addiction, about my sobriety, things like that, so that I could kind of know what you guys wanted to know a little bit more about. And so I'm going to answer those questions for you today. I got hundreds of questions, you guys, literally hundreds of questions. I read through most of them earlier today, and I've gotten even more since then. There were a lot of repeats of some of the questions, and there was a lot of personal questions where people were asking me like what to do in a certain situation. So I just want to make this very, very clear before I get into this. I am by no means an expert of recovery or addiction. I am just sharing my story and what has worked for me. I am not a representative of any way to get sober. I am sober by way of a 12-step program, but there are many, many ways to get sober, and I respect all of those ways. I just don't want people to die because of drugs and alcohol, and I want people to live the most possibly amazing lives they possibly can have today without having to have drugs and alcohol in their lives. And so that's just kind of like my mission about talking about it and just like planting a seed in the way that the seed was planted for me when I first got sober. So, you know, I've done previous videos where I've talked about my recovery story, my addiction, and things like that. It weaves in and out of my vlogs. If you guys like to hear a lot about addiction and recovery, please go watch my vlog, Peter Vlogs. I talk about it on a pretty regular basis over there. I also talk a lot about it on my Peterisms channel. So if this is the kind of video that you like, my Peterisms channel, I do a lot of videos specifically just about addiction and recovery over there as well. But over here, I like to do videos from time to time dedicated to recovery because I know that there are so many people that watch my videos that are sober, however you define that. I also know that there are a lot of people that watch my videos that have family members and friends and spouses, children that are struggling with addiction. And I also know that there are people out there that are wanting to get sober as well. They just don't know how to, or they're scared to. So this is why it's important for me to make this video. Since it's recovery month, and I've said this in the last couple of videos that I've talked about anything to do with sobriety, please feel free to drop your sobriety birthday in the comment section below. We're all family over here, and I think it inspires other people when you see all the numbers. I got a comment in my last video that I did talking about this a couple days ago, and somebody was like, congratulations to all the people in the comment section. Like, this is amazing. And I thought it was really, really cool. And anytime I talk about recovery, I always say, you know, feel free to shout out your recovery, your sobriety day in the comment section below. I think one thing that does is when you see somebody in their sobriety dates in 2019 and somebody like my own is in 1994 and somebody else is in 1983 and somebody is in 2023, what you see is that, you know, we're all over the place, and I think it gives people hope. I think what they realize in seeing that is there's a lot of people out there that are sober or that are getting sober and that are staying sober today. It's not just Peter talking about his own experience in a video. It's then flooded with comments of people that are sober and they're living sober lives today, and I think that gives a lot of hope. So if you want to participate in that way, I would love that. Like I said, I've done a lot of dedicated videos talking about my addiction, talking about my recovery in previous videos. So I'm not going to necessarily do that today. In fact, when I speak today in a 12-step program and I share my experience, strength, and hope about being sober, and that's all I'm doing today is sharing my experience, strength, and hope. I'm only one story of millions of sober people out there, and I don't, you know, I'm not the gatekeeper on recovery. There's lots of different ways to stay sober, and like I said, I respect those different ways. I think it's each person's decision that they have to make that decision and have their own journey. But when I share my story today, I don't necessarily do a drunk log, and I don't talk a lot about my using days back in the day until, I mean, from time to time I do when it's like, it comes up, you know, in storytelling or, you know, talking to friends or whatever. But typically today in my message that I try to share, I don't typically go back and talk a lot about like my drug using, like specifically my drunk log and things like that, because that's not really my story today. My story today is that I got sober December 17th of 1994. I did not want to get sober at that time. And I basically had two options at that point. I could either go into treatment or I was looking at going to prison. And I knew that I was not going to make it in prison, so I opted for the easier, softer way, which was treatment. I did not want to be there. And so for those of you that don't know the story, I had wrecked a car that night, called my dad, and my dad was basically like, he was at the end of his rope, and I was 22 and a half years old, and he said, you can go to prison or you can go to treatment and I'll pay for it this last time. I had gone 4 previous times, so this was my 5th treatment. He said, you can go and this will be my last time, but I'm done. Like, your stepmother and I, we're done. We're not enabling this anymore. We're done with this. And so, I like crashed my car, passed into this restaurant, and then put it in a ditch. And so anyway, that was the end of my story. And then I ended up going into treatment. I was in treatment a little bit over 30 days. My first week in there when I was in detox, which was pure hell, I did not want to be in treatment whatsoever. I did not willingly, like, I didn't feel like I was willingly there. I was like looking for outs and things like that. And I had really nowhere to go. The second week, I was so like loud and kind of obnoxious my first week that the second week I kind of learned to shut my mouth and not say anything. That was kind of like how to get through it. And that was when I was moved over into the rehab part. The third week, I started listening to what people had to say, and I started listening to what my counselor was saying, who is still a very dear friend of mine today. And I started listening to a lot of what she was saying and what other people were sharing, and people that were older than me that had gone to treatment 10 times versus my 5, or 20 times versus my 5, and that had been going through this. And what I realized was, no matter what our backgrounds were, where we came from, or what our lives looked like, we were very similar in our stories. My story was not unique. And that I was going to end up like a lot of these other, you know, men and women that I was in treatment with at that time if things didn't stop. And so I really started listening, and it started sinking in. And in my 4th week, I was really scared to get out. I was really terrified to leave treatment. I felt very safe in treatment. And, I can remember talking to my counselor, and my counselor said to me, I said, I'm scared to go. And she said, you have everything you need, and you also have a safe amount of fear, and that's the perfect place for you to be, to go, and you're ready to go. And I left treatment. I did most, I would say 75 to 80% of what I was told to do when I got out of treatment. The rest of it, I was very resistant to. I did it, but like, I ask why a lot. I don't understand why I have to do this. I was, you know, I just was very, very challenging and resistant. And one of the things that I did that I was absolutely told not to do was that I got in a relationship literally like 3 days after I got out of treatment. How I'm still here today, getting in a relationship so quickly out of treatment is beyond me. This was somebody that I had met on my last night drinking and using. So my story has drugs and alcohol in it. Lots and lots of alcohol. My alcohol of choice was Jack Daniels. My drug of choice was pills and cocaine. And but I would basically use anything that people gave me. So the last night that I was out, I had met this guy through a friend of mine, and he was an attorney, and he was good looking, and he was a really fantastic guy, and I didn't remember him at all. But my friend that I had kept in contact with in treatment, and I was very focused on what was going on outside of treatment. My counselor put it into that. But this friend of mine was like a healthy friend. She'd been a friend of mine all through like kindergarten, elementary, junior high, high school, and college. And so she would call and check on me, and she kept on telling me this guy was like checking in on me. And so when I got out of treatment, she was like, he wants to know how you're doing. Well, that to me was very appealing, especially because I was very focused on this guy that I had broken up with, the guy that had introduced me to cocaine and crack cocaine as well. And so when I got out of treatment, like, he contacted me to check in on me, and so he like came to visit me. He lived in a different town. He lived in Illinois, and so he came to visit me, and then like that weekend we became boyfriends, and that was not healthy. And then when we broke up 2 to 3 months later, I turned around and I got right in another relationship with somebody that was a complete pothead, and then that led to other substances, and he has since passed away. And he was a fantastic, both of the guys were fantastic. They were just really great guys. After that relationship ended, my sponsor in recovery, so in 12-step programs, we have sponsors, and they are people that walk us through a 12-step program. it is recommended and suggested that men sponsor men and women sponsor women, and that your sponsor should be somebody that has a year or more sobriety time and also a working knowledge of the 12-step, and that they have a sponsor and they have a home group. And a home group is a group that you go to on a regular basis and make a commitment to. You do service work and things like that. And so my sponsor at that time, I've always had a male sponsor until about 8 years ago. And in talking to my therapist and some other people, in our pamphlets, it says that gay men can be sponsored by women and lesbians can be sponsored by men. And I never tried that because I had always just believed that men sponsor men. And there was always a disconnect for me. I had fantastic sponsors. I had amazing sponsors, but there was always something that was kind of missing. And so, in talking to my therapist at the time and in talking to some other people, there was a woman that I knew that I highly, highly respected. She had a year less than me in sobriety time and was working very, very hard in sobriety. And so I reached out to her and asked her if she would sponsor me. She talked to her sponsor and then she came back and told me that she would. And she's been my sponsor ever since. And she saved my life in so many ways. I'm so entirely grateful for her and my support system. The greatest friend that I've ever had in my entire life that I mention all the time in my videos, and she has said that I can share in videos that she's sober, is my dearest best friend, Tanya Jean. And I always say this on her sobriety birthday. I always say to her, and usually in a meeting, I'll say, you know, when I got sober, they promised me that I would get my family back, that things in my life would be repaired, but they never promised me that I would meet the greatest friend that I would ever have. And that friend is my friend Tanya Jean, that I met through sobriety. And we wouldn't have this friendship today if we didn't both speak the language of sobriety. My mother also got sober 6 months after I did. So my sobriety birthday is December 17th of 94. My mom's sobriety birthday was June 2nd of 1995. She did not get sober because of me. I wish she had. I don't know why it makes a difference, but she got sober because my cousin Caroline's dad had a heart attack. And at that time, my mom, unbeknownst to me, she had tried to get sober several times. She decided that whether she lived another year or another 10 years, that she wanted the quality of her life to improve. And that was how she got sober. She would tell me later that she wished she had gone to treatment. She didn't. She went right into a 12-step program. She got very, very involved in a 12-step program. I think we went to 1 or 2 meetings together, but after that, we never heard each other's lead, which is when you share your story in a meeting. We never went to meetings with each other. It was very important for us to keep our programs very, very separate. And that she had her sobriety and I had my sobriety. Now, I would come over to her house after meetings and we would drink coffee and talk, and we spoke the language of recovery. But it wasn't until after my mom passed away that I went to some meetings that she went to, and people would say, oh my God, that was your mother. Like, she was a dear friend of mine that I didn't even know some of these people, you know? And that was kind of cool, honestly. And I would recommend that for anybody that has family members, spouses, things like that, children, grandchildren, to keep that separate. You have a right to have your own sobriety if you're in a 12-step program. And that's not, I mean, I see a lot of people come together as family members or spouses and whatever. And I think that to do that every once in a while, I think might work. But I don't know that I could have sat in a meeting with my mom and been talking about things on such a deep level, and my mom would have had some reaction to it, and I probably wouldn't have shared it as vulnerably and honestly. So that's why we didn't do that. After the last relationship ended in my first year, my sponsor said to me, are you ready to do it my way now? And I said yes. And he said, okay, no more relationships until I say that you can. And so I went months without dating anybody, having a relationship. And the whole idea behind that is that we don't really have anything to give to anybody else in our first year of sobriety, and we also should be focusing on ourselves. So it's about selfishness, and it's also about taking care of ourselves. But you really don't have anything to give to a healthy relationship when you're trying to take care of yourself and get sober, you know? So it's selfishness, but also selflessness at the same time. So I went several months without being in a relationship or dating anybody, and then I met who I call my first boyfriend, and we were together for 4.5 years until I met my ex, and then after he and I broke up, I met my husband, and we're now together. So that's kind of my story. I don't get into a lot of my drug and drinking history as much, unless I'm kind of talking about olden days and things like that, but in my story, I don't really talk about that. A lot of what I talk about today, not on video so much, but I did talk about this in my vlog the other day, but with friends of mine or in meetings and things like that, is that the difference of early sobriety versus long-term sobriety. Being sober 29, coming up on 30 years, and we don't borrow time in sobriety, so if I make it to December 17th, I will have been sober for 30 continuous years. I'll have 30 continuous years of sobriety. But, you know, it's weird. It's like the way that I look at the world today is completely different than the world that I looked at when I first got sober. A lot of the questions that I get or I got were questions of kind of how I would have handled things when I was early in sobriety, so I'll try to answer those to the best of my ability. So yeah, I do want to say that. There was something else I wanted to say about, I was talking about coming up on 30 years, because people ask me all the time. They ask me about cravings, they ask me about this, or like whatever. It's a completely different way to look at life. Some early things that really helped me was that I had to put my sobriety before everything else. It always had to be a priority to me, because if I didn't prioritize my sobriety, I wouldn't have anything else. I wouldn't have my marriage, I wouldn't have my family, I wouldn't be able to pay my bills, I wouldn't have a job, I wouldn't have YouTube, I wouldn't have you guys, I wouldn't be able to take care of a dog, I wouldn't be able to do anything. I wouldn't probably be alive. My dad, several years ago on my birthday, we were at lunch, and I said something about, do you think if I kept on using, and he cut me off and he said, you'd be dead right now. I said, you really believe that? He goes, oh yeah, absolutely, you'd be dead. So to me today, it's about a design for living. We talk about how drinking and drugging is but a symptom of, deeper issues. And so for me, it is a design for living. Sobriety to me is a language that I speak today. It goes through into every area of my life. My husband's very knowledgeable about addiction. My husband does drink, but he's very, very knowledgeable about addiction. So that's kind of the background of my story. I'm sure other things will come out as I go through some of these questions. Now, I've read some of these questions, but not all of them. The newest ones I haven't read. So I'm going to kind of go through here and just kind of try to pick out questions that I haven't really answered a whole lot before. A lot of people ask me for suggestions and advice about things, and I will answer those, but from how I would handle it. So I don't want anybody to take that advice and run with it. It's just how I would handle it today at 29 years sober. Somebody asked me, what are my thoughts on medication-assisted treatment, also known as MAT? So it's interesting how, okay, when I first got sober, these weren't really options. There wasn't really a medical-assisted treatment the way that it is today. It's huge today. And I've seen kind of it grow over time, and my opinion, in all honesty, has changed over time about it. When I first got sober, really the only medically assisted treatment that we would see was Antabuse. I don't even know if that was out when I got sober. It might have come out later, but I don't really remember. That wasn't an option that I was given. Antabuse is a drug that you're given so that if you drink, it makes you really, really sick. I do know a lot of people that have drank through Antabuse and made themselves really, really sick so that they can keep on drinking. So I don't know that I think it's necessarily a great drug. So when I was I worked in a treatment facility for 13 years as a counselor, and when I worked there, we were trained to work with buprenorphine, which is the name for Suboxone. So I was very educated on the early days of Suboxone and how Suboxone treatment went. And when Suboxone started, doctors had to be educated specifically on Suboxone to prescribe Suboxone. And then you had to check in with them, and you had to have drug screens, and you only got like 2 to 3 days doses. Now that's not the case with Suboxone and Subutex and things like that. Like, people are given months-long doses. They're not required to be in outpatient programs. They're not required to be in counseling, things like that. There are so many MAT programs today. I will say this, like I said, I am all for the saving of lives. I have friends of mine that are on medically assisted treatment. I will say that the only times I've seen medically assisted treatment really, really work is if somebody, A, is not an addict, and so it really helps them to get off of it, and then they just change their lives. And so maybe they were never an addict to begin with, or if they are, and they're taking it in conjunction with either being in therapy, attending church, 12-step program, doing something other that will work on the internal issues. Because addiction, for me, I don't know about other people, but for me, is not just about the substance. Like, all my problems did not go away when I stopped drinking and drugging. In fact, a lot more problems happened down the road. So it's not just a solution to it. I think the people that I've seen that have been really, really successful in medically assisted treatment are the ones that are doing other things in conjunction. I've actually seen quite a few people that do it and then go work in the field as well, and I think that has been helpful to them. But they're also doing other things like being involved in counseling or outpatient programs or 12-step programs, some of them, and things like that. The attitude has also changed a lot in 12-step programs. I think early on there was this attitude that, like, if you're on medically assisted treatment, and there's probably areas in the world where people still hold this attitude. I can tell you the meetings that I go to, I don't see this attitude. But where people that are on medically assisted treatment aren't sober. And so people would kind of like look at them in a different way. I really, to be honest with you, I don't think that at all today whatsoever. I just want people to live, and however they decide to do that. So that's how I feel about it today. And it's not my place to judge somebody else's journey and how they decide to do it. And in all honesty, like, that was never offered to me because it didn't exist when I got sober. I don't know what decision I would make going back in time if that was offered to me, So I just don't know. Okay. How to cut off immediate family that are still using addicts, for example, your mother. Well, I had to do this. When I got out of treatment, my counselor said to me, she actually had me call people in treatment. My mother was one of these people that I had to call and say, I can't have a relationship with you if you continue to use. It was kind of like, in retrospect, it's kind of funny because I was like so worried about it. The majority of my friends were just like, okay, whatever. I can remember my mom being like, you don't really mean me about this, right? And I really didn't see my mom a whole lot until she got sober. I just didn't. Because my mom, not only being a drinker, it wasn't like my mom drank every single day and every time I come over, she'd just be wasted drunk. That was not my mother. But she was enough of a trigger for me that if she was drinking and she wasn't working on it, that her drinking had been a trigger for me in the past. And I would have allowed to use it, I think, as a trigger. The greatest gift my mother ever gave me besides birth was her sobriety. Period, end of story. If you're a parent out there and you're thinking about getting sober, do it for your kids. If you need something to walk through the door in, do it for your kids, then later do it for yourself. It was hands down the greatest gift that my mother ever gave me. I cannot tell you how many people have, I mean, today we see lots of families that are sober together. I can't tell you how many people that have come up to me through the years and said, you're so blessed that you got sober and your mom got to see you sober before she passed away and you got to see her sober before you passed away. And they'll say, you know, my dad passed away or my mom and they never got to see me sober. Or my dad was a horrific alcoholic and I never got to see him sober. And it's such a cool thing that I got to have that with my mom. I think, I think you present to that person, if I were to do it, I would say, I love you. I can't continue to be around this and enable this anymore. I mean, I had it done to me. I think it's such a scary thing to do to people. But then I think you have to look at your own selfish needs and all, you know? Like, my dad was done. My dad was like, I'm done. Like, I'm out, right? And he would admit fully, he was like, I wasn't fully educated on it until this last time. And he's like, I was done. My dad was very good friends with a doctor that was my addictions treatment doctor. He was a world-renowned addictionologist. And my dad was really good friends with him. I had worked with him for years because my dad is a retired surgeon. And so he knew him because they worked in the same hospital system. And so basically everything he told my dad to do, my dad did. And my dad was just like, I didn't know a lot about it. My dad is highly, highly educated on addiction today, as is my entire family. So I think that I don't really know what the answer is to that. If you're that worried about somebody, go and say, I'll help you find treatment, I'll help you find therapy, but I can't continue to do this. So if you're going to continue to hurt yourself, then I'm not going to be part of it. I mean, that's what people said to me. I don't know what else to share other than, I always kind of dance around that because I'm like, I don't want people to have like cut off their families, but people cut me off. And I think it really helped me in retrospect, you know? I think it really helped me to know that I was affecting other people. I don't even know that I knew. My dad, years later, you know, I was talking to my dad. This is when I listened to the audiobook, Beautiful Boy, by David Sheff a couple years ago about his kid's meth addiction. They made it into a movie. I read it, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. And I remember reaching out to my dad because the dad is always so scared of his kid. I mean, that's what our fear is, right? That they'll die if we cut off any contact with them. And I said to my dad, have you ever read this book? He goes, oh yeah, I read it when it first came out. I was like, how did you even hear about it? He was like, I don't know, New York Times or something like that. And I said, is that how it was for you? He goes, and I wasn't a meth addict, and that's where a drug is a drug is a drug. And my dad was like, that's exactly how it was. My dad would tell me later that like when I was in jail, I mean, he even told me at the time that when I was in jail, he knew I was somewhere safe for the night. He's like, you're not gonna die being in jail, so I can sleep tonight because I know that you're safe. I mean, that's really, when you get to those lengths, like that's, when you're staying up late at night because you're so worried about where that person is, like then that the addict and the alcoholic is incurring fear in those other people. And I didn't even understand that at the time, you know? Okay. Do you think any amount of healing or therapy would allow an addict to drink in moderation? I can only speak for myself. I can't say for other people. I've seen other people go out and completely screw up going out means going back, like leaving 12-step meetings and going back to drinking and using drugs. I've seen people go out and completely screw up their lives and be on the drug dealer's couch in 6 months sleeping because they've lost everything. And I've seen other people be extremely successful. So I think that's a decision you have to make on your own. I know for this alcoholic and addict, I don't think that moderation is an option for me. How do you forgive others that may have stopped being friends on your road to being sober? You know, that was hard for me at first. I think like when I got sober, I didn't really know how to navigate those friendships. It's weird how they kind of changed through the years. You know, like it wasn't just for me about people getting, I thought at first it would be about people getting sober, people not getting sober. A lot of it for me was people just growing up. A lot of people kind of grew up and grew out of, I mean, I realized that in treatment, nobody was really partying the way that me and my small group of friends was partying anymore. And then some people died, and that was sad, because they didn't really, I was really had a hard time with nobody learning anything from me. And then other people like moved on and kind of like grew out of the partying scene. We all kind of just grew distant. judgment, you know? It's why, like I say to people, don't make decisions in your life based on friends that you have right now, because those people might not even be friends of yours 10 years from now. Make decisions based on what's best for your life, you know, today, and also what might be best for your life down the road, because these people might not even, you know, they might not even be in your life down the road, you know? But that was hard for me, I think. Okay, let me see. How has your relationship with yourself changed? I mean, that is an entire video to itself. That is so fantastic. In so many ways. I think, you know, working steps has really allowed me to forgive myself. It's really allowed me to understand other people better as well. And yeah, I think I don't know. In so many different ways. It's how I look at the world. It's pausing, not reacting. I mean, a lot of what I've learned about myself that I learned through recovery just happened in the last 10 years, you know? And I think it's because of how I work through the world through the eyes of recovery, if that makes sense. It's like every situation that happens to me in my life today, I encounter through the eyes of recovery, and I always learn something from that. So I've changed a lot. I've had periods in my life where I was very, very angry. I have a peace and serenity today that I didn't have just even last year, you know? That I just had a lot of anger and a lot of, I don't know, and I've worked through a lot of that. I think I'm less angry today. I'm less reactionary today. I'm more peaceful. I'm more forgiving. I will also say this, and being forgiving, I'm also somebody that today, it's like I give a few chances to somebody, and then I'm kind of like, okay, like my circle is very small today. I don't need hundreds of people in my life. I think that was the other thing, is that I think one of the things I've learned the most is that I was seeking validation from people. I was seeking validation from men. I always thought that I needed a man to define who I was. I don't need that today. But that came out of really marriage counseling. But I don't think if I was sober enough, I would have heard that. So I think I needed to be sober to have a clearer mind to hear a lot of these things. Okay, Alex's advice for spouses. Alex and I have thought for a long time about doing a video together about this. Did you ever have to let go of the thought of your mom's sobriety? Oh yeah, like I never thought my mom would get sober. This is why I said my mom got sober at 51. Now I have friends of mine that are getting sober at 65 and 70. This is why I say, you know, I mean, when I got sober, 22 was young. I'm seeing 15-year-olds, 14, 12-year-olds getting sober today. This is why I say don't ever, I mean, there's a broad range of people getting sober. I've seen so many people in their 60s and 70s getting sober lately, though. This is why I say don't ever give up hope. I had given up hope. I never in a million years would have ever thought that my mom would have got sober. I mean, and to be honest with you, people were like, how did your mom tell you? I don't really remember how my mom told me. I'm sure I've talked about it in a video sometime, but I don't really remember. Like my mom sitting down and being like, yeah, I'm sober now. Like, I don't remember really how that transition happened, you know? But don't ever give up hope. That doesn't mean that you continue to enable that person, but please don't ever give up hope, because that person might eventually someday get sober. Okay. I mean, this is a lot of questions. Okay. What was the most surprising thing about choosing to be sober? The most surprising thing about choosing to be sober was that I didn't really know that I chose it until I had already chosen it, if that makes sense. So I tell the story in my vlog a lot. I was at a meeting at 6 months, and I walked out and got, you know, my token and whatever, and I kind of just was standing in the parking lot, and I looked at this coin, and I was like, you haven't done anything consistently in your life for 6 months, let alone not drink. And everything changed for me in that moment. I was 6 months sober before I think I chose sobriety. Everything changed for me in that moment. I was like, this is like crazy, you know? So I think that's the most surprising thing, was that I chose to be sober. I think the other thing that was really surprising to me, where are we at on time here? I think the other thing that was really, really surprising to me was how easy it is to navigate the world without drugs or alcohol. Like, I thought that I needed it to buffer everything, and life is just so much easier. I mean, this is not an easier or hard thing, but like, I can remember going to a concert a while after I got sober. I went with a friend of mine who is like involved in the music industry, and he got great tickets to go see, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Fish or somebody like that. And and he didn't drink or use drugs. And I can remember going to it and I was like, this is what a concert's like without drugs or alcohol. It was like my first concert. And I was like, this is crazy. Maybe it was Dave Matthews. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, this is phenomenal. You know, like, life is so good sober. And I think that was like the first time that I was like, oh wow, this is really crazy. But yeah, I don't think I chose it until like I had peace of mind and all that kind of stuff. This is going to stop. Hold on. Okay. I don't think that, I think I just went through the motions. That's why, like, we say things like fake it till you make it. You know, put one foot forward, just do the next right thing. I did a lot of that. I literally lived, I talked about this in my video the other day. I literally just like lived off of the slogans, the recovery slogans, because I just really couldn't think that deep about stuff. You know, I mean, I see people now that are like 2 months sober and are starting businesses and doing, I'm like, I don't know that I could have done that. You know, like my first 2 to 6 months, I was pretty much like, I just, you know, it was hand to mouth for me. Like I just really struggled a lot. I was in a lot of meetings. I was very lonely though, because I was one of the only young people that got sober in Indianapolis at that time. There was kind of a group of us. I still see this one woman every once in a while. She and I were both sober at the same time, got sober at the same time. And then there was a group in another 12-step program that these young people, they weren't super friendly to me. And I can remember like after the meeting, like they would stand in a corner and smoke cigarettes outside. And it was in the winter, you know, and they'd be like talking about going to get cheeseburgers. And I can remember saying to my sponsor, like, they never asked me if I want to go. And he was like, do you ever ask them, like, if you can go? And I think that's one of the greatest things I've learned. And I didn't learn this till later in sobriety, was that it's powerful for me to put my hand out and introduce myself to other people. So there were 4 years that I didn't go to meetings. I had no spiritual foundation. I had no emotional sobriety. It was probably, my marriage was in the shitter. That's why we ended up in marriage counseling later. I mean, I was so miserable. I was so angry. It was literally the worst 4 years of my entire life. I was angry at God for taking my mom, which made no sense. I just didn't know where else to be angry. I was angry at everything. I didn't really care anymore about anything. I was just really was a nasty human being. And so I was sitting downstairs in this house, and I was in the kitchen, and I was making a list, and I put, like, it was in January. I looked it up not too long ago. I think this January is going to be, like, 12 or 13 years since this happened. Maybe 14 years. I can't remember. But anyway, I, like, wrote down this list, and I was like, laundry, fold laundry, vacuum. And I got to, like, the fourth thing, and I just lost it. And I called my best friend, Tanya, and I said, will you take me to a meeting? And she said, I've been praying for 4 years for you to ask me that. And that night we went to a meeting. And after that, I was like in it to win it. I can remember going back to her house that night, and I was saying hi to her husband and stuff. And so I said, I think tomorrow I'm going to go to the noon meeting. Do you want to go? And Tanya said, no, I think it'd be great for you. And I said, oh, please go with me. She goes, you know, I've been going to meetings for 4 years while you haven't, but I think it would be great for you. And so my first 2 years coming back into meetings, I was like a newcomer. And I went to 2 meetings a day, almost every single day for 2 years. I went to a noon and I went to an 8, Monday through Friday. On Saturdays, I went to 2 different meetings. And I think it was like a morning meeting and an 8 p.m. meeting. And then I went to a candlelight meeting. So sometimes I went to three times a day. And then on Sundays, I went to an 11 a.m. spiritual meeting. And then I went to an 8 o'clock speaker meeting. So I was going to like 14 to 16 meetings a week when I first came back. I met a lot of people. Early on, I heard this lead. A lead is when somebody shares their story. There's a lot of them online. You can just put them on YouTube and look up like speaker lead and it'll come up. I was listening to this one. It was about this woman, and she said, it's hard to fall off the wagon. Like we refer to that term as like starting drinking again. She said it's hard to fall off the wagon when you're sitting in the middle of it. Basically meaning if you're sitting in the middle and you're doing a lot of stuff and you know a lot of people, it's hard to fall out. And so when I heard that was when I started going into meetings. It was so hard with me as somebody with social anxiety. I have horrific social anxiety. People are like, how do you make videos? I'm talking to a camera. It's not like I'm in a group of 10 people. I have horrific social anxiety. I walk into places with my head down. I'm still working on that today. It's better than it was 10 years ago, but I'm still working on it. And so I started going into places and forcing myself into meetings, talking to the person that was sitting next to me, introducing myself. And before long, I started knowing everybody. I would walk into a meeting, people would be like, hey, Peter's here, you know. And it felt like such a sense of belonging that I've been seeking for so long that it just felt really, really nice. I made a lot of friends. I was going out to lunch after meetings. That 2 years of my life really became very much about building the foundation of my sobriety that I had lost along the way. And I'm really, really grateful. In those 4 years, I never picked up. Thank God. I don't know how, in retrospect, that I didn't. I didn't drink. I didn't use any drugs. I never picked up. But how I didn't is beyond me. Especially because I had friends of mine that picked up during that time and went back out and started using again. And So when I came back in, it was like I was like a newcomer, and I just like took it all in. I soaked it all in. I'm very different today in sobriety than I was before I left and went back out. I didn't share a lot in meetings. I didn't interact with a lot of people. I didn't call people and check on them. I didn't do service work. I didn't do a lot of that kind of stuff. Today I do all that stuff. People ask me, it's interesting because whenever I do these, people are like, are you a sponsor? Have you ever thought about it? I'm 29 years sober. Being a sponsor is something that's expected of you in a 12-step program. Yes. The answer to that across the board is yes. I've sponsored many, many men, and on and on and on through the years. I'm a sponsor, have been a sponsor. It's not mine to share their story on video, but I mean, if you ask anybody in a 12-step program, do you think somebody that's been sober 29 years is a sponsor, they look at you and go, I mean, do they go to meetings? Do they work up? Yes. So, I mean, it's expected of you. That's part of working a 12-step program is sponsoring other people. But that was something that I had never done before, you know, and people would ask me to speak and I wouldn't speak. And interestingly enough, I started to get asked to speak more when I came back because I started sharing so vulnerably when I came back into meetings. Best memory in recovery. I mean, hands down, my best memory. Oh God, let me think. Oh, well, I have two of them. Okay, so hands down, my overall like vague theme is my friendship with my friend Tanya Jean, and after meetings driving around getting fountain cokes, just laughing our ass off, crying our eyes out, telling stories, just the bond that we have developed through the years. She's my ride or die. She's my heartstone. Yeah, those rides home from meetings and getting fountain pops and going to the Meijer after meetings. I mean, it's been magical, you know, and I hope it continues for the rest of our lives. The other one, it's so weird that this is coming to me. So I was in a Victorian literature class when I was in my undergraduate degree. My undergraduate degree is in English. My master's degree is in social work. So I was in this Victorian literature class. I never showed up. And I can remember we had to read Middlemarch by George Eliot. And I write some ridiculous like 25-page paper, 20-page paper on it. I stayed up all night long writing this paper. I was drinking the whole time. This book is like 1,200 pages. I don't even know how I did all this. But anyway, I hadn't showed up to the class in like 3 weeks. So I showed up to the class, and the teacher is standing in the door, the professor, and she's like, and she was somebody that I actually kind of respected. I thought she was really cool, and she knew her stuff. She had gone to like Emerson or something like that, and I just thought she was really cool. Well, she saw me walking down the hallway to the class, and when I came up to the classroom, she stood in front of the door. And she goes, you can't come into class. And I said, excuse me? She's like, you can't come into class. And I said, I did this paper, blah, blah, blah. She goes, no, you need to go withdraw from this class. She said, people have complained about you smelling like alcohol when you come to class. And I could tell she was nervous and saying it to me. And I was like in my head, like, fuck you. And I just looked at her, and she said, I think she put her hand on my shoulder or something like that. I can't really remember. But she said, I'm really, really worried about you. I hope you get some help. And then she just turned and walked in the classroom. And I just was like, what? And I ended up going down and withdrawing from that class. So I ended up withdrawing from all of my classes. And I ended up going down to school and just acting like I was in school because I didn't really know what to do. And I remember this semi-friend of mine, this girl that I knew, was in one of my classes. She's like, what are you doing down here? You're not even in any classes. And I can remember that was like, I kind of put my bag on my shoulder and walked. I was just like, I'm done. Like, I got called out, right? But years later, when I was working in treatment, I was actually going into a Starbucks, and my door on my car wouldn't work. I was actually driving my ex's car, and his door in his car wouldn't work, and I used to always go through the drive-thru. And so I had to go into the Starbucks. Well, I went in the Starbucks, and this woman was standing in front of me. And I can't really remember how it went now. She like turned around, and I was like, oh my God, that's Dr. So-and-so. And she just kind of looked at me and smiled. And then she came back up while I was making my order. She was doing a crossword or something. And she was like, she asked the guy, she's like, do you have a pencil sharpener? I'm using this pencil for a crossword. And the guy was real rude to her. He was like, for what? And she was like, I just need a pen or a pencil. Do you have one? And I was like, man, just give her a pen. I said something like that. And she turned around and she was like, thank you. And she looked at me again, but kind of like we locked eyes, right? And so she walked out. Or she walked over to the table that she was sitting at. And when I walked back, this has been so long, I can't remember exactly how it happened. She like stood up or something, or I stopped her, I can't remember how, but I looked at her and I said, Dr. So-and-so, I mean, I still remember her name to this day, first and last name. And she goes, Peter Monn. And I said, how do you ever remember me? And she said, I don't ever forget a student. And she said, especially ones that I was really concerned about. And I said, at that time, I think I was 12 years sober. And I said, well, I want you to know I'm 12 years sober. and I work in a treatment facility, and I have a great life today. And I'm really thankful. Like, you were one of the only people that ever said anything to me about, you know, being worried about me. People never said that to me. I mean, I found out later that people were worried about me, but people at the time didn't really ever say anything to me about, like, I'm really worried about you, get some help. Like, nobody really said that to me. I had, like, one friend. You know, I kept everything hidden from my parents and my family. I got kicked out of family holidays. I was disinvited to Thanksgiving the last year, but that was when people knew things were really bad. I mean, but till then, my dad and my stepmom did. My mom didn't really know anything. But nobody would really come to me and say anything, you know? It's why I'm, like, so big about saying, okay, if you're worried about this person's going to be mad at you, you'll be less worried about that if they're alive and they don't like. If 15 years from now that person's alive because they got help, because they're still pissed off at you about what you said, you'll be glad they're alive. You won't care about the friendship. That's how I feel about it. I'm not worried about pissing people off today in my life. If I tell them something that they need to hear and they're pissed off at me about it, but they stay alive, more power to them. Be pissed off at me. At least you're alive today, and that makes me happy. But anyway, I said that to her, and she was like, I always wonder what happens to some of my students, and I definitely wondered what happened to you. That was when she put her hand on my shoulder, and she squeezed my shoulder, and she goes, have a wonderful life. And I was like, I'll never see her again, you know, but it was like, I made amends to her. I said, I'm really, really, and we're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to make amends before, like, talking to our sponsor and praying on it and stuff like that. And the amends is the 8th and 9th step. Well, making amends is the 9th step. And so I made amends to her, and I explained that I was in a 12-step program and I was sober, and I needed to, you know, take responsibility for my behavior in that class and whatever. But that was a really, really cool moment for me. That was like seeing recovery in action. I got to see recovery in action. Maybe I was like 9 or 10 years sober. I don't remember. This is going long, and I'm not getting into any of all these questions I'm, like, answering. These are such good questions that you guys are asking me. What was your wake-up call where you knew something needed to change? I don't know if that wake-up call happened until, like, 6 months sober, but I remember in that moment I was like, you have peace of mind today. People are not telling you all the crazy stuff you're doing the night before. You're not, like, trying to piece together the night before, because I did, because I was a blackout drinker. And I think it was 6 months where I was like, you've had, like, a really calm couple months of living. Things are good. You have food in the refrigerator. You're making coffee every day. You've got a couple people in your life that care about you. Life's not crazy. And I was like, this is good. It was really hard for me to kind of, like, get used to not living in chaos and hysterics, though. Like, I was so used to, I grew up in chaos. I was so used to living in hysterics and chaos that calm for me was kind of unsettling for a very long time. But I think that was when I, like, realized that, like, okay, you have a good life today. Like, you don't want to go back to that. And then I started kind of fighting for it. Okay. Can you talk about the experience of a child of an alcoholic? What can help us as adults now? Well, I think therapy, books, 12-step programs like Adult Children of Alcoholics, ACOA, Al-Anon, things like that. That is, Al-Anon is for friends and family members of alcoholics and addicts. And Al-Anon is not to help you fix the alcoholic or addict. It's to help you fix yourself. So you'll go there and get a sponsor and work steps on yourself, and how you define yourself in relation to that. I think that's how. I could do a whole video on being a child of an alcoholic and the fear that I had growing up and things like that. My mom, like, she taught me a lot, because I think my mom did the best. I wanted to pull this up. Prayer, for the sick man. There is this prayer that my sponsor has me say all the time, and this came out of a discussion about my mom, and it really helped me learn a lot about, where is it at? Why is it not pulling it up? Okay, it really helped me learn other people, because my sponsor would say, you had so much compassion and empathy for your mom and her drinking. Can you look at this person that has wronged you in this way? Or can you look at this person that may be struggling with something in this way, that you would look at your mother in that way? And the prayer for the sick man goes like this: God, when a person offends me, help me to remember this is a sick person. Help me show the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Show me how I can help them. So when I've encountered in my life a situation that I don't understand, this has just been the last couple years, or, you know, extreme hatred or anger, and extreme misery, or addiction, you know, or whatever in my life today, or somebody that just is like coming at me or whatever, I think that's really helped me see it like from their point of view, that I'm really not in that. I don't really have anything to do with that. Like, that's really about their sickness. Like, they need to go heal themselves. It's really about their insecurities, and it's really about their misery and their unhappiness. I'm really not in that at all, you know? And so it's really helped me to understand other people through my mom's sobriety. Like, that has really, really helped me a lot. And I'm so grateful for that. Not just that my mom got sober, but that all these years later, she's helping me through her sobriety and the compassion and the empathy that I had for her, because like I said, she did her best. My mother was a sick woman. She was an alcoholic. She tried her best to be the best mother that she could. And there were moments when she was a fantastic mother, you know, but she tried her best. And so seeing that when I'm encountering situations with people in my personal life or wherever, and I'm like, ooh, like, I don't know what to do with this situation, I go to the prayer for the sick man. Like, you know, grant me the same tolerance that I would grant a sick friend, you know, because this person's sick. They can't help themselves, you know, and maybe they have, you know, mental health issues, or maybe they have addiction issues, or maybe they're just miserable, or maybe they have insecurities, or maybe, I don't know what's going on, but it's not really about me at the end of the day. It's about them. And maybe I can grant them the same peace and serenity and tolerance and empathy that I would grant a friend of mine if my friend was laying at home bed with the flu, you know, and that's how I look at it today. Okay, let's get here. Some of these are like, how'd you know and stuff? Okay. Some of these questions, I don't know. I'm gonna have to, maybe I'll do a follow-up video to this, sometime. There's some long questions on here, so I'm going to go through these and maybe write some of these out. Thoughts on California sober? I got a lot of questions about what I think about California sober. I've done a previous video about it. My opinion has kind of changed probably since then. I don't really care, to be honest with you, about, I don't really care how anybody gets sober. It's none of my business. It's everybody else's decision how they get sober. I have to clean my side of the street. I think at first I kind of felt like, I don't know what I think about that. I wish I could just smoke pot. You know what I mean? Like, I love to smoke pot. I didn't really suffer a lot of consequences. But I know if I start smoking pot, I'm going to want to eat a pill, or I'm going to want to drink. I know myself, right? And I think that's bottom line, knowing yourself. I think there's a lot of people that are real successful California sober, and more power to them. And I hope that they have amazing lives. I don't really have any issues in it. I think I shared this on my vlog not too long ago. My sponsor, so I had two past sponsors of mine that passed in the same year. One had like close to 30 years, and the other one was over 40 years. And both of these men just so profoundly affected my life in really positive ways. And my one sponsor, I can remember at one point, there's two kind of situations that happened with pot smoking, but I was kind of like pissed that these people were coming to meetings and they were on the marijuana maintenance program, and I was like, marijuana maintenance program is basically California sober. And so he was like, well, how does it affect you? And I'm like, well, we're a program of abstinence. 12-step programs are programs of abstinence. And I was like, well, we're a program of abstinence. He goes, it doesn't affect you. Maybe it works for them. I mean, this was a man at the time that was probably 35 years sober. He maybe 30 years sober at the time. And he was like, it doesn't affect you. let them do what they're going to do. And I really learned a lot through that, you know, that what somebody else chooses and decides to do has no effect or bearing on my life and my choices whatsoever. And the reality was, in that moment, I was probably jealous because I wanted to smoke pot. It's really the truth. You know, somebody asked me in here, like, do you still ever, like, okay, let me explain this because a lot of people ask about cravings. So romanticizing using and cravings are completely different to me. Romanticizing using is me thinking, God, like, oh, it'd be fun to have a beer after, like, you know, a long day sitting on the front porch. Or I'd love to smoke a blunt with, I don't think we ever smoked blunts back in the day. So a joint, I loved joints. I'd love to smoke a blunt with a friend of mine or whatever. Like, do I romanticize it every once in a while? Yeah, I told this in a video the other day. You know, I wondered what a Mike's Hard Lemonade, whenever I say this, people always laugh at me. I have wondered what a Mike's Hard Lemonade tasted like ever since they came out. Now there's 9 million kinds of liquor. Let me just put this in perspective for you, okay? When I got sober, there was Boone's Farm, okay? There was 99 Bananas or whatever. There was Manischewitz red wine that you got at the grocery store. There was the Gallo wine for $3.99. There was Natty Light beer, okay? There was Miller Genuine Draft. If you wanted a really bizarre beer, you were getting Sapporo, Red Stripe, which I drank the shit out of it, and like St. Pauli Girl, Amstel Light, okay? Like, that was it. And, like, if you wanted something else, there was maybe, like, a Zima or a wine cooler, okay? Now, there's 9 million things. So, yeah, it's like a kid in a candy store. I'm an alcoholic and an addict because I loved using alcohol and drugs. I loved it until it didn't work for me anymore. I loved drinking and using drugs. It was fun. It was exciting. I loved trying new things. Oh, my God, I loved it, you know? But that tape stops pretty close in my head today because it's like, okay, but a Diet Coke, you can try a different kind of soda and get the same kind of excitement out of it. What's going to come with all of that is not worth it to me, the downfall of my life. A craving to me is when I am like, okay, like I'm really like, I want to get effed up. Like I want to get fucked up. Like I just want to escape. When that happens, then what I realize is there's something so much more deep going on. It's not about the drink or the drug. I wish that is something I wish I had learned early in sobriety. I didn't really conceptualize that in early sobriety, that if I'm craving, like maybe not like the first year, I think that really was hand to mouth, just being an addict. But I think after that, it was like, if I'm really craving, there's something deeper going on. I'm wanting to escape, and I need to deal with what that deeper is going on, not just the hand to mouth, the drinking. That's why it does concern me when people just like stop, but then they don't work on the internal issues. Because even if you didn't have any internal issues before you became a alcoholic and a drug addict, you've developed issues along the way because you've hurt people, you've hurt yourself, you have, whatever through the years. I believe that I was predispositioned to be an alcoholic or an addict. I have it riddled on both sides of my family. So I think that I took the first drink and the drink took me is really what I think happened. And then it was just like, okay, I showed up. Like I was here. Like I was off to the races. And it felt delightful. I mean, it felt magical. I can remember the first night of getting like wasted drunk with like a friend of mine and 2 girls at this elementary school that I went to and swinging. They're all puking and I'm swinging on the swings. I'm like, I can't wait to do this again. Do you know how many times I've heard similar variations of that story in meetings? Probably 10,000. And that's not an exaggeration. I hear that story all the time. Something different happens in us. I don't know what it is, but something different happens in us. So yeah, okay. Let's see. Somebody asked me like meaningful things, and I shared this in a video not too long ago, and it's something that I don't think about very often. One of the most meaningful things for me as a person in sobriety is when I go to like a barbecue or somebody's house for like an event or a holiday, and they'll call ahead of time and be like, what kind of soda do you like? Or is there a special kind of drink that I can get for you? I don't know why, but it's that thoughtfulness. It's the same thing for me as being a vegetarian. I think we always want to go real deep. Like, how can we support these people? Like, can we go to therapy with them? Can we go to Al-Anon? Yes, you need to do those things. Those are non-questions. Like, you should be doing those things anyway for somebody that you love, right? But I think doing those kinds of things, creating safe spaces, not waiting for them to ask you not to drink, but just saying, we're not going to drink this Thanksgiving because, listen, they're 2 months sober, they're out of treatment, there's not going to be any alcohol at Thanksgiving. And Grandma Susie, if you have an issue with that, then you're just not going to come to Thanksgiving this year. Stay at home and drink your Boone's Farm and eat your turkey that we send home with you, but you're not going to come over here because I think it's things like that, thinking it through. And I've said this to people for years. People are like, oh my God, like I can't have a margarita or a beer in my own house because my spouse got sober 2 months ago. If your margarita or your beer is that important to you over your spouse's or your child's or your mother's sobriety, maybe take a look at your own substance issues. Because if your drinking is that important to you, that you're that protective of it, it's not about keeping you from doing something, okay? It's about protecting that person. But I have to say, when I go places and somebody will call me ahead of time or call my husband, like my husband would be like, so we're having dinner at so-and-so's house. They called, they said, what soda do you want? I'm like, oh, that is so nice. Like they thought about me. I think that's just really, really cool. So anyway, oh, I love this question. Before I get off here, because I'm going to do a follow-up to this because I love these questions. But somebody said, do you think it's acceptable to not forgive an addict for past actions you just can't forgive? I did a whole video, I think it was on my Peter Risman's channel, about the amends process. And the amends process is an 8-step and a 12-step program. We make a list of people that we have harmed. In the 9th step, we became willing to make amends, we made direct amends to those people. In the 8th step, we became willing to make amends to those people. When you do that, making the amends process, you go through this with your sponsor, you look at your part in things, you take it to that person, you ask them ahead of time if you can. Now, I was taught to make direct amends to that person to their eyes. If you can't do that, a phone call, whatever, but I was taught typically, if possible, I have friends of mine that literally flew 10 hours to go look at somebody in their face and make amends to them. That was how hardcore the people that were old timers when I got sober were. And that's how I was taught to do it. The amends process is not just saying I'm sorry, okay? Because most of the people in our life, like my dad, have heard I'm sorry so many times it doesn't mean anything. My dad used to say to me, I don't want to hear I'm sorry because sorry means forget what I just did. So the amends process is looking at that person saying, I wronged you. It's taking responsibility for the actions, laying out what those actions were, detailing them, being specific about, and saying it won't happen again, and this is my plan of action for how it won't happen again. Oh, and furthermore, what else am I not remembering that you want me to make amends for? And on top of that, how can I rectify the situation? And you let the other person have control over that whole situation. I have had almost to everybody that I've ever made amends to say to me different things. You can do this, you can do that, whatever. I had an ex that I saw at a funeral, and the ex lived out of the country, and I knew that I wasn't going to see him again. And so I was early in sobriety, a couple years sober, and it was a friend of mine we were all really, really good friends, and our friend had taken his life. And so I, followed him out in the parking lot, chased after him and followed him. And he was like, what do you want? I mean, he finally turned around. Anyway, I said to him, I go, I'm sober now and I need to make amends to you. He did not want to hear it at all. And so I finally, I'm just like, please just listen to me. This is the only opportunity that I have. And we had a really, really volatile relationship. This was somebody that I dated when I was 18, 19 years old. And so he finally was like, what? And he listened to me, and I told him all. And at the end of it, I said, what can I do to rectify the situation? He said, you know what you can do? Never fucking contact me again. Well, you know what? I can fucking do that. And I haven't, I haven't friended him on any social media. I don't talk about him, unless I'm sharing that story. I don't talk to people about him. I don't. I've never contacted him ever since then. That's what he wanted, I can do that. I have had friends of mine that have had people say to them, I'm not ready to hear your amends right now. And no, I don't accept your amends because it was too painful what you did for me. You have absolutely 100% right, okay? The process is doing the amends. The process is not the amends being accepted. I think that's sometimes a misunderstanding. If I make amends to somebody and that person says to me, go fuck yourself, I don't want to hear it, and I could care less about you, and no, I don't accept your amends, that doesn't change me working the steps. That doesn't it's not like an A or a B or an F. It doesn't stop me and I can't move on. I've done my job. I did what I needed to do. I made amends, or I attempted to make amends. If they don't want to hear it, I can't change that. And you might have a lot of angry feelings. That might change 20 years from now. And it might not. The person that did that, I don't know what that person did to you. Alcoholics and addicts do a lot of horrific shit. We've had a lot of horrific shit done to us. But no, you don't have to accept or forgive anybody just because they're sober at all. Period. End of story. I have friends of mine that have had exes and spouses, ex-wives that they were married to 30 years that will look at them and say, I don't ever want to speak to you again, and no, I don't accept your amends. And they have absolutely every right to do that. I think it's actually a really, really important question. Recovery for me today is a language that I speak. It's the life that I live. It's a design for living. It's how I maneuver the world. Everything I do and I say, I look constantly through the lens of recovery. It's literally like the back of my hand because I've been doing it for so long. And I love talking about it, and I'm so passionate about talking about it, and I'm going to save all these questions, and I will do a couple other follow-up videos this month on this because I love talking about it, and you guys ask such fantastic questions. Thank you. And if you have other questions, feel free to DM them to me or put them in the comment section of this video if you want to, and I will respond to those questions as well. I literally probably have 300 or 400 more questions to answer, and I got to 6 in this video. I just want to say this before I close out this video because we're getting close to an hour. We do recover. It is hard. I can remember my counselor saying to me, if you do this, this will be the hardest thing you ever do. It has been the hardest thing I've ever done. But she also said to me, but it will be the most valuable thing you ever do. It has been the most valuable thing that I've ever done. It has literally been the mountain of my life that I have climbed up, stood on top of, and said, yes, I did it. And it has defined every moment of my life. And I am incredibly grateful for my sobriety, the opportunities it's opened for me, the life that it's given me back and given to me, the people that I've met, the experiences that I've had, and being able to share my story with you. So thank you so much for listening to me. I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.